Hey y'all, it's Blake again. What's up? Today I decided we're gonna finish up the lands in EDH. Last time we did the utility lands, and this time we're gonna talk about fixing lands. Lands that help you cast your spells. Very important. So quick rundown of the tier list as usual. S is the best of the best. These are the lands you're always gonna play when you can play them. Yeah, simple as that. Cards that you're always gonna play. A is great cards. You're always looking for an excuse to play them, but they're not necessarily like auto includes or anything like that. But they're excellent, and you always want to play them. B are good cards. We're starting to get to cards that can be cuttable, but are generally cards you want to play, and most situations you'll be happy with playing them. C is mediocre cards, cards I'm trying to cut, or cards that I'm not excited to play unless I have a very specific reason to. And D is just cards that I'm just not interested in touching. Cards that, unless I have an ultra narrow specific reason to play them, I'm just not going to play them, not going to bother. They're just not worth playing. Juice ain't worth the squeeze. All right, that being said, let's get into it. Try to keep things nice and direct today. First up, let's talk about Ash Barrens. It's a colorless producing land. So on its face, it's not very good at fixing, but you can pay 1 mana and discard it to basic land cycle it. This card's very interesting. I think this card is pretty solid. I'm not really looking to kind of throw it in any deck. I'm generally wanting the fact that I'm discarding this card to matter. So if I'm, running a discard theme or, get lands back from the graveyard, this is one that very easily goes and puts itself in the graveyard. But if I really need the mana the turn that I draw this or have this in my hand, I can just play this out as a colorless untapped land, which is totally fine. But otherwise, I'm essentially getting like a tap land out of it because I'm going to tap one of my lands to discard this to get the land and then play it. And then that land I played is untapped. So it's kind of like a weird tap land or a untapped colorless land. If you're in a pinch and you have to do the thing now. But I'm generally kind of avoiding this card, like I said, unless I have something that makes the basic land cycling a little bit more valuable than it is on its face. So I think I'm kind of like top of C for this one. Yeah, this just barely squeezes into C. Next up, we have the filtering lands. So these are lands that tap for a colorless, and then you can pay one of their two colors to get any two combination of the two colors they can produce. So this one, you can pay a red or a black and tap it to get black, 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 red, or red, red. These are like okay. These are quite good in two color decks because they are untapped lands. And sometimes in two color decks, it can get awkward if you draw like, a bunch of mountains and then you draw this. Well, at least I can make double black still. So they're quite good in two color decks, but outside of that, I'm not playing these in 3 or 4 color decks for sure. 5 color decks either, especially. So, this, I think, just also seeks into C for me. Yeah, it's good. They're pretty good in 2 color decks, but that's about it. So, and even in 2 color decks, you can live without them. So, yeah, Filter Lands kind of landed in C for me. Next up, Forbidden Orchard. This is a rainbow land. It taps for mana of any color. But when you tap it, you have to give one of your opponents a 1/1 colorless spirit token. This land's very good. Giving your opponents a spirit is one of your opponents of your choice is not very much of anything. You just give it to the person that you can least utilize it. So you don't give it to the player that has like a sack deck, or you don't give it to the player that you're about to attack. So you don't give them like a free blocker. The downside for this card is just very low. It's an untapped rainbow land. I'm looking to play this in like 3+ colors. Not always, but this is a card that I'm definitely interested in, especially in like 5 color, 4 color decks. This is definitely a card that I will go to. You'll take any rainbow lands you can get that are untapped. I think that lands at solid a B. There are also some cute things that you can do with this, like if you're in like a Massacre Girl deck or something, where you can make giving your opponents a 1/1 a benefit. Then this card is obviously pretty cute in those decks as well. But I think I'm still gonna land it at a B, because it's not universally applicable, but it is good in the situations that it's good in. Next up, we got the life lands. These are dual lands that enter the battlefield tapped, and when they enter the battlefield, you gain a life. This is just nothing. These are just Ds. Even if you're in a very specific deck where you can take advantage of that, like a little bit of life gain, like if you're in a life gain deck, like one life is not going to make or break a game. Even in a life gain deck, like it might trigger like one or two things, and then like, I don't know, maybe you put like a 1/1 counter on something or whatever. It's just, these just are never worth it to me, not even in the life gain decks or any situation. So these are just bottom of the barrel. They just go to D for me. Next, I believe we call these the bicycle lands. These are tapped duels that have the basic land types. Very important. For example, this one is a Plains Island. Enters the battlefield tapped, and you can cycle it by paying 2, which means you discard it and you draw a new card. These are quite good. I am very interested in playing these in 2-color decks or cycling decks specifically. And you can even get away with these in like 3-color decks as well. If you're like on a budget or something, the basic land types are pretty huge here. So if you know you're far seeking, you can go get one of these or whatever. So yeah, I really like the cycling lands. So I think I'm pretty happy with putting them in B. These are good lands. Not always going to play them, but they're solid, especially if you're on a budget. Almost all of these are quite cheap. Next up, the temples. These enter the battlefield tapped. Tap for one of their 2 colors, and when they enter the battlefield, you scry 1. So this one taps for red or white, for example. These are like, I'm never really playing these, but like I could see some people seem to like these and happy with them. This is kind of like the borderline for tap lands for me. Scry 1 just isn't quite enough for me to have a tap land like this that doesn't really have a lot of other upside. But for some people, the Scry 1 is enough for them. So for me, I think this is just going to be the bottom of C. It's borderline DC. I'm going to put it bottom of C. Next up, we got the Pain lands. They tap for a colorless, or you can tap them and for one of their 2 colors, and then it deals 1 damage to you. These are just straight up untapped dual lands. And most of the time, you're just going to tap this for a colorless anyway, so that way it doesn't ping you. But it is really nice that when you need the colored mana, you can take a couple damage throughout the game and be happy with it. I mean, you'll generally take 2 damage from a shock land anyway. There's a good chance that you won't tap this for colored mana twice in a game. But when you need to, it's, whatever. You took shock land damage. Like, that's very acceptable. So yeah, Pain lands are very excellent. I will play these in 3 and 4 color decks sometimes. If, I don't have enough dual lands or whatever to put in the deck otherwise. Yeah, Pain lands are lands I'm always happy to play. Always looking to play them. These land solidly as our first A for me. Play Pain lands. Most of them are quite cheap as well. So even if you're on a budget, definitely go to these. Pick these up. Next up, Reflecting Pool. This is an interesting one. This is kind of a rainbow land. You tap it and add 1 mana of any color that a land you control would produce. So you already have to have the mana for this to make the color, but once you do, it'll make any color that you have. So this kind of gets progressively better as the game goes on. Or if you have some of the other fixing lands that we're going to go over on this list a little later, the more colors that a land can produce, the better. So for example, if you run this with the Forbidden Orchard that we talked about, now this just straight up taps for 5 colors. So Reflecting Pool is quite good. It's obviously not worth playing in like 2 colors. 3 colors, I'm starting to think about it. But generally I won't play this in 3 colors. But 4 and 5 colors, where I'm starting to reach for like a lot or all the rainbow lands, then this becomes more likely to be a rainbow land or like a tri-land or whatever. So yeah, in those decks, I'm quite happy to play Reflecting Pool. But since it is kind of narrow, I think I'm going to put it in B. Like I said, you can play this in 3-color decks, but generally I don't. But it's also because it's kind of expensive right now, and it is about to get a reprint as rare in Commander in the next Commander Legends set. So that is a bonus, but I think I'm still going to land it in B for me. Because it does rely on you having other lands, and that's not always ideal. Next up, we have the Battle Bond lands. These lands enter untapped if you have 2 or more opponents, and they tap for 2 colors. Obviously, we're Commander, so we generally have 3 opponents, if not more. These are just straight up dual lands. This is one of the few S's I think I'm going to give out, but this one's an S. I need no excuse really to play these. The only time I would ever cut these from a deck is when I get to some of the even more broken lands that we're going to talk about later that combo really well with each other, like shock lands and yada yada. You probably know them, but we'll talk about them soon. So yeah, I think this is an S. You're going to play this in every deck that you can, unless you just have the best lands that money can buy. Yeah, but most of these Battle Bond lands, at least the actual the ones from Battle Bond are a little bit on the pricey side, but they're also about to get reprinted, so that's really the only downside. But the Commander Legends ones are super cheap, so definitely pick them up right now. Next up, we have Ancient Ziggurat. This is a land that enters untapped, and you can tap to add 1 mana of any color. You can only spend this mana to cast creature spells. That is a very significant downside for this rainbow land. I never go to Ancient Ziggurat. The only time I would ever play this is if I'm in like 4 or 5 colors of like a very specific like tribal deck where I'm playing like 40 creatures. And my color restrictions are pretty high. And even then, I'm not happy about playing this card. Because this can't cast any of my spells that aren't creatures. Yeah, it's a pretty significant downside. I'm not really ever interested in this card. I'm putting this in D. I just don't like this card. Even in the very small circumstances where I could play it, I'm just gonna be safe and just not. Next, Survivor's Encampment. There's also another one, Holdout Village or something like that. It just does the same thing. It's just not a desert. This taps for a colorless mana, or you could tap it and tap an untapped creature you control to produce a mana of any color. So this is a pretty niche land. I do like this better than like some like lands that we're going to talk about soon that, you know, do a similar effect. There's a lot of decks that really like this tap and untapped creature you control because they just want to tap certain creatures for effects that benefit them. So for that reason, it's going to get a little bit of a bump. As far as like fixing, this isn't great fixing. I do like that this comes in untapped, but I'm not really happy about relying on a creature to get colored mana from this thing. But yeah, to me this isn't like that strong of a fixing land. But if you do want to like untap, if you want to tap creatures for like certain effects, which there are quite a bit of, and there are even some on commanders that you want to do, then this card has some pretty nice utility while also fixing you in that regard. So for that reason, I think I'm going to drop it in C. Yeah, I'll drop it in C. It's a little bit niche, but in the circumstances, it's good. It's good. All right, next up, we got the Triomes. These are lands that tap to produce 3 different colors of mana, and they have the basic land types. So, for example, Indatha Triome is a plain swamp forest. They enter the battlefield tapped, and you can cycle them for 3 mana. These are absolutely stellar lands. The fact that they have the land types, as we talked about earlier, is very important with the bicycle lands. The Triomes or the tricycle lands, they're good for the same reason. Except they're even better because basically any fetch can get you any Triome. Unless you're just really unlucky, and in this case, you get the Scalding Tarn and you want an Indatha Triome or whatever. Yeah, but Triomes are amazing. You're always going to want to play the ones that you have in your color. If you're in 3 color, you just auto slam the one that's in your 3 colors. If you're in 4 colors, you may not play every single one that you can, but you will definitely play a couple of the important ones. So yeah, Triomes are excellent. These are going to land an A pretty easily for me. They're pretty great. Next up, the Horizon cycle. So right now this is an incomplete cycle. We have 6 of these. We have Horizon Canopy, and then we have the enemy colors. But hopefully we'll get the last 4 soon. That being said, this is a land. These lands, you tap them and you pay 1 life to produce a colored mana. So these kind of force you to be a pain land. But you also get the upside of you pay 1, tap and sack the land to draw a card, which is absolutely stellar upside for the pain land. To me, like I was talking about earlier, the pain land's not a big deal for me anyway. I'll lose a couple life throughout a game to fix my mana. You already do it with shock lands and such anyway. But yeah, these I'm always happy to play. Always looking for an excuse to play any of them that are in my colors. I don't have to hold this in my hand and hope that I can cycle it and spend a bunch of mana on it to draw a card later. I can just slam this on the battlefield, use it for my fixing now, and then when I run out of things to do, I can just ditch it and get a new card. So these are excellent. These are an easy A for me. Next up, we have the Pathway cycle. So these are modal DFCs. So they have 2 sides, one for each color of mana they could produce. So for example, this is Bark Channel Pathway on the front, which produces green. And then the backside, you could play it as the backside instead and play it for blue. These, they do enter untapped as well. These are fine. I'm only playing these ever in 2 color decks. I'm never playing this in 3 and up. I just have a million better options as we're going to go over. But in 2 color decks, these are fine. I mean, they make all of your colors, but you only get to choose one and you have to choose it when you play it. So generally what I do with these, my play pattern is I'll play, if I have other lands in my hand, I'll play them out first as long as they allow me to cast the spells I need to cast. And then when I need, when I'm starting to need a certain color, that's when I, and this will produce that, and I'm running out of lands to play of that color. That's when I put this down as the color I need, so that way I ensure that I, don't miss with it. But that all being said, these are just fine. Like I said, I'm only playing these in 2 colors, and even then they're like by far from the best fixing lands in my deck. So these are C's for me. I do think they're a little bit worse than the filter lands, which I'm probably only playing in 2 color as well. But yeah, I'm not super high on Pathways. Next up, we have the World Tree. This is a land that enters the battlefield tapped. Taps to produce a green. As long as you control 6 or more lands, your lands can tap for a mana of any color. And you can pay like 1 billion mana and tap and sack this to put a bunch of gods from your deck into play, which is completely irrelevant. So this is just a tapped rainbow land, essentially, in your 5 color decks that makes all your other lands rainbow lands, which is very, very good. But you can only play it in 5 color decks. So that being said, to me, this is kind of like a auto-include in your 5 color decks. The god text at the bottom is just flavor text, just completely ignore that. But this is just a free like chromatic lantern. This is a tap land that you should be willing to run in your 5 color decks, which are already can't really run any utility lands, but this is worth running in your 5 color decks. Yeah, if you're playing 5 colors, just put the World Tree in. That being said, it can only go in 5 color decks. But in 5 color decks, it is quite good. It's good fixing. It is a little slow, so I'm gonna ding it a little bit. But you'll definitely play this. I think I'm gonna put it in B. I'm gonna put it next to these other rainbow lands because you do have to wait a little while. It's slow, and then you also have to wait a little while before you can make mana of any color. But it is very helpful. Yeah. So it's definitely B. Next up, we're getting to the first of our fetch lands. This is Fabled Passage. You tap and sack it to search library for a basic land, put it into play tapped. Unless you have 4 lands, then you untap the land. So this is a fine land. I'm interested in playing this in a few spots. Once I'm getting into 3 colors, I'm starting to get pretty low on this card because I just have a lot more options that I'm willing to reach to, like these rainbow lands and tri lands and stuff. But if I'm in a lands deck, then I am willing to play this even in monocolored. Because this is a fetch land that, is just good. You just want fetch lands when you can get them, and the entering the battlefield tapped is a pretty decent downside, but at least it's not always tapped. When you get 4 or more, it enters untapped, so then, yeah. It's definitely totally passable. I'm pretty happy with Fabled Pass. I mean, it's never like that bad. Even in like your 3-color decks, you can pass a Fabled Passage. But I'm not really looking to play this in 4 and 5-color unless I'm specifically a lands deck, like 4-color Omnath or something. Then maybe I could make room to squeeze a Fabled Passage if I don't have like a ton of other fetches in my collection. But yeah, Fabled Passage is a pretty solid card. I'm definitely happy with playing this. I'm putting this in a B for sure. Next up, we have upgraded Fabled Passage. Prismatic Vista. You tap it, pay a life, and sack it to search for a basic land, put it in the battlefield untapped. This is just way better. I'll take the life loss any day over having my lands enter tapped to the first couple turns of the game. And fetch lands are great. Getting basics is, isn't like amazing, but I'm still interested in playing this in like 4-color decks potentially. But once you start getting into 4 and 5 colors, you're going to start running pretty few basics unless you're running like cultivates and stuff, or cards that care about basics. So you do need to have the excuse when you're in 4 and 5 colors that you have a decent amount of basics. But you only need like 7 or 8, I think, probably before you can play this. But that being said, in like 3-color and under decks, you can pretty freely include this in your deck and have no worries. So this is definitely A for me. I think I'm going to put it like here. Next up, we got the Bridge Cycle. So this is from Modern Horizons 2. These are tapped, enter the battlefield tapped artifact lands that are indestructible and produce 2 colors. So this one is Dark Moss. This is the green-black one. These are solid, very solid. If you're playing a multicolor Artifact Matters deck, these are tap lands that are worth playing. These will help with your affinity. These are cards that you can get back if you mill them with like Myr Retrievers or whatever. These have a lot of hidden utility being artifacts, as some may know from like Seat of the Synods and the old ones from Mirrodin. But these are also indestructible, so unlike the other ones that you have to worry about them accidentally getting swept up in a Vandablast, these don't. That being said, they still die to exile, obviously, but anything does. Yeah, these are tap lands that I'm interested in playing. They aren't stellar. They're still tap lands that just produce 2 colors. But being artifacts and indestructible is a pretty big upside for a tap land. So if I'm interested in artifacts and I'm in like 3 colors and less, I'm probably playing these. These are solid Bs for me, for sure. Next up, we have the best lands that have ever been printed. These are the fetch lands. These tap, pay life, sack them. This one in particular, Scalding Tarn, the red-blue one. You search the library for an island or mountain, put it on the battlefield, and then you shuffle. So this gets any land that has the land types listed on the fetch land. These actually aren't color restricted. There's no mana symbols on these cards, so I can play the Scalding Tarn in a white-black deck technically if I wanted to, which is interesting. But you will, that's obviously you wouldn't do that, but you could definitely play the Scalding Tarn in a 3-color deck where you're like heavy blue and not playing red or something, So one nice thing about fetches is that fact is that you can, if you don't have the most expensive fetches like does the like the allied color ones or whatever, like Windswept Heaths and stuff, then you can just play the ones that you have. If you open some from a Modern Horizons booster, you can play those in your deck, even if they're not the perfect ones for your deck. But yeah, that being said, these lands are just broken. They can get like any of these lands on our list. They can go get the Triomes. They can go get the Shocklands, which we'll talk about later. They also trigger landfall twice, like the other fetch lands we talked about. They also make it enter untapped. They also trigger anything that cares about the graveyard, Threshold, Delirium, whatever. They can, if you have a dual land, it can basically get you any color in your deck. Yeah. These are the best lands ever printed. Not close. Yeah. Just put them up here. I don't think I need to do much more explaining. Next up. I did put these in my utility lands episode, but I probably shouldn't have. They should have went here. It makes more sense that they're here. But this is Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth. It's a legendary land, and it makes each land a force in addition to its other types. So these are very good fixing. If I'm in a green deck, a green heavy deck, this just kind of replaces a forest, and it fixes me for green forever. Yeah, and then if I incidentally have, some creatures that have Forest Walker or whatever that care about my opponents having forests, then that's just even more upside. Giving my opponents like forests or whatever is just, I don't care. I mean, with these lands, you just shouldn't care if your opponents get fixed on the color that you give them or whatever. It's pretty irrelevant. But yeah, I'm even interested in playing this in like 3 and 4 color decks. Maybe not 5 color. But 4 color, definitely I'm still interested in playing these because I just place a forest with these, and then when I draw this and play it, I never have to worry about green mana again. So yeah, these land in the solid A for me. I'm basically always playing these. Next up. Oh boy, I don't know why this is in English. This is Sungrass Prairie. I think these used to be called the filter lands. But I usually call these signet lands because it's more accurate at what they do. They're lands that you pay 1 and tap them to produce 1 mana of 2 different colors. So this one is Sungrass Prairie, like I said. So this one produces green-white. These lands are awful. I never want to play these signet lands. They don't tap for a mana on their own at all. And when I do pay a mana into them to make 2 colored mana, it only produces very specific 2 colors. So unlike the filter lands that we talked about earlier, the filter lands, I can do the same thing but produce any 2 colors of what I want. And it already taps for mana on its own. And this does neither of those things. And I don't even really want to play the filter lands like in 2 color decks that much. I'm just never playing these. These lands are horrible. I would probably rather play any land on this list. Yeah, I would. These are below D. These are in the literal shithole. I would never play these. Don't play them. They're bad. Next up, we have the slow lands. This is a new land cycle. This is from Midnight Hunt and Crimson Vow. These are lands that end the battlefield tapped unless you have 2 or more other lands, and then they tap to produce 2 different colors. So this one is Deserted Beach. This produces white-blue. These are very good lands. Do not sleep on these lands. I know a lot of people aren't really talking about them too much right now because they are cheap and they're not real flashy. But these are excellent. These are windmill slams in 2 color decks. I'm playing these in 3 color decks, especially if my commander is, above the 3 mana mark, which is pretty hard to do if you're 3 colors. Or pretty hard not to do if you're in 3 colors. But yeah, these are excellent. The only downside to these, to me, is like, they don't have basic land types on them, I guess. But like, I'm always happy to play these. The most important turns in Commander are when you're getting to the turn 3 and 4, in my opinion. So yeah, Deserted Beach. This is an easy A for me. This cycle of slow lands is excellent. Pick them up now while they're cheap. Next up, we have City of Brass, and then also Mana Confluence is essentially the same, so they kind of go together here. These are rainbow lands that enter the battlefield untapped, and when you tap them, they deal 1 damage to you. These are stellar. These are the best rainbow lands, basically. Once again, pain lands. It's just not a big deal to me. We start at 40 life. I can afford to lose 5-6 life throughout the game to tap this to be permanently fixed for all my colors. So yeah, rainbow lands. I'm interested in playing these even in 3 colors. Although I don't generally reach to them because I generally have pretty good access to lands and mana bases, and most of my decks I still want a decent amount of basics in and such. So I don't always play these in 3 colors, but 4 and 5 color, it's just Windmill Slam. But you can easily play these even in 2 color if you want to. If you have them lying around, they're still excellent in 2 color, just like Pain lands. So these are an easy A for me. I'm going to put them right here. Next up, I reluctantly have to talk about Opal Palace. This is a land that enters the battlefield untapped. It produces a colorless mana. You pay 1, tap it, add 1 mana to your of any color in your commander's color identity. If you spend this mana to cast your commander, it enters the battlefield with a number of 1/1 counters on it equal to the number of times it's been cast from the command zone this game. Okay, that's some weird flavor text on a yeah. This land is bad. I'm not really ever interested in playing these weird filter lands that, you go down a mana to produce a mana of any color. And then my payoff is like I get a couple 1/1 counters on specifically my commander. I'm really only interested in this if I care about my commander like having 1/1 counters on it or being a very specific like size, like having like 1 or 2 power more being like a big difference. But even then I'm like, this card is super forgettable. I never play Opal Palace. I don't foresee myself playing Opal Palace. This is just a D for me. Yeah. I'll put it top of D. These other Ds are really bad. Next up, we have what do we call these? The check lands? Is that what they call these? I think it's check lands. Maybe it's buddy lands. I don't remember. It's one of those. So this is these are lands that have 2 basic land types. So this one is Prairie Stream. This has Plains Island. And as the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or more other basic lands. Ooh, that's a little tough. These are good budget mana fixing. That being said, budget's not really part of the discussion here a whole lot. I know I've mentioned it a few times, but that's, kind of by the by. These are not very good. These are pretty good in 2 colors, I guess, where I have quite a few basics. Specifically 2 colors, but I'm never playing any of these in 3, 4, 5 colors for sure. And even 2 colors, they're just like fine. Yeah, these are just C's for me. I'd probably rather play these than temples because they have the basic land type. Yeah, I think I'm above them on the pathways too. So yeah, I'll put them here. Next up, we got Spire of Industry. This is a land that enters untapped. It taps for a colorless mana, or you can tap it and pay life to add 1 mana of any color. Activate only if you have an artifact. So this is just a very, very slightly worse City of Brass. In that you do have to have an artifact, but also you don't always have to have it ping you. So in that way, it's also upside. This asks you to be in an artifact deck, a deck that basically always has an artifact on the battlefield. But even then, you can even still just tap it for colorless, even if you run out of artifacts for some reason. Spire of Industry is a great land. I'm just kind of debating if I want to put it like top of B or bottom of A. The ask for this rainbow land is just so low. Having an artifact of any kind is just like nothing because you are going to want to play this in specifically artifact decks. Or if you're just in a 5-color deck and you just reliably have like mana rocks or so. Yeah, I think I'm on A on this. Yeah, Spire of Industry is great. These are like $1 or less right now. Pick these up. Pick up Spire of Industry. It's a great land. It's worth way more than $1 as far as like how well it'll play compared to how much you pay. Next up, we have Myriad Landscape. This is a land that enters the battlefield tapped. It produces a colorless. Ouch. But you can pay 2, tap, and sack it to search library for up to 2 basics that have to share a land type. Then you put them on the battlefield tapped. This card is not very good at fixing, but it does ramp you slowly. I'm never playing this in 3 color, even if I'm a lands deck. Because if I'm a lands deck, I probably won't have that many basics. And the utility lands I do have are very important and will be strong. So this is like lands in like 2 and 1 colors. And in those decks, it's pretty good. You can take a turn off to ramp with this, but having a tapped colorless land is like a pretty huge downside. But in like 2 and 1 color decks, sometimes you can afford to do that because most of your lands will probably enter untapped because you can afford to run a lot of basics and such. So I think Myriad Landscape's probably like a bottom of B for me. It's kind of disingenuous putting this in the fixing land thing when you're only going to play it in 1 and 2 colors. But yeah, I think it still does technically fix you, but the tap land, enters tapped colorless land is really tough. But yeah, if you're in 1 and 2 colors where almost all your mana base is going to enter untapped always because it's basics, yeah, you can afford a Myriad Landscape. So yeah, bottom of B for Myriad Landscape. It's fine. Next up, Path of Ancestry. Enters the battlefield tapped. Add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity, so it's essentially a rainbow land. And then if you use that mana to cast a creature spell that shares a type with your commander, you scry 1. That's a pretty nice little bonus for a tapped rainbow land. Honestly, I'm pretty happy with just a tapped rainbow land. But occasionally you're just going to use this to cast a commander, which will scry you 1 if you cast your commander with this, because your commander shares a creature type with your commander. But also there's upside of if you randomly have like a few cards in your deck that also share creature types with your commander, then you might get a scry 1 here and there. A tapped rainbow land's totally fine. I'll play this in 5 color if I'm a tribal deck, but I don't really like playing this land in like 4 and 5 color if I'm not specifically a tribal deck. But if you are a tribal deck, you can even play this in 2 color and be pretty happy with it. So the application for this is like it's got some pretty, it's got a little bit of direction, but it also doesn't. It's pretty universally fine, and then it has a little bit of upside here and there. I think this is this is another like bottom of B, top of C for me. I think I'm gonna go bottom of, no, let's go top of C. I'm on top of C for this. Next up, Exotic Orchard. It taps to add 1 mana of any color a land an opponent controls could produce. Now that doesn't sound great, but just keep in mind we're in a 4-player game, and it is very likely, especially on turns like 2 and 3, that your opponents are going to have their colors, which means you're going to have at least one of, if not both of your colors, or all of your colors with this, depending on how many colors you are playing, obviously. This is a auto include for me for like 2-color decks, because like, you know, I'm looking for untapped duels as it is, and this will generally produce at least one of my colors, and then eventually it'll become a real dual land. 3 colors, I'm still looking at this for the same reason. I'm looking for anything close to an untapped tri-land, and this will generally be an untapped tri-land for you, at least a dual land. 4 and 5 color, I'm even interested in playing this because if same reason, as many colors as it can produce for me, the better. So Exotic Orchard, this card is like 50 cents right now. So if you're on budgets, like pick these up, play them in any multicolor deck. You'll be very happy with it. These are an A for me, for sure. I'm even going to put them... Am I going to put it above Triumphs? No, I think I'm going to put it here. Yeah, pick up Exotic Orchards, man. They keep reprinting it, thank God. They put it in like every commander deck, and so it's real cheap. It's going to stay cheap. But like, yeah, pick them up whenever you need them. Whenever you're building a multicolor deck, just put this in. You'll be happy. Next up, we have the Shocklands. Everybody knows these. They have 2 land types, and then they enter the battlefield tapped unless you pay 2 life. So this is Stomping Ground. It's a mountain forest. These are very easy, yes. These in combination with fetch lands make it nigh impossible to have perfect mana like all the time. Plus the having to pay 2 life when you need the mana immediately is just such a small downside that yeah, these are like the best duels we have in the format. Basically, having the land types entering untapped means that they're fetchable. Yeah. Shock lands are no doubt the next best lands in our format. Next up, we have the fast lands. These are lands that enter the battlefield untapped as long as you have 2 or fewer other lands. So if this is your 3rd land, this will still enter untapped. But anything after this being your 3rd land, these will enter tapped. And then they produce 2 colors. So this one's Copperline Gorge. This makes red and green. These are not generally good in our format. The only time I would even think about playing these is specifically in 2 color. But even then, like, I would just rather try to fit more basics in if I can. Yeah, I'm not very happy about fast lands. They're pretty poopy. I don't really need any. I don't really foresee myself ever wanting to play these. Because like I said earlier, the most important turns of the game for me are like turns 3, 4, and 5. This does enter untapped on turn 3, so if you hit it on exactly 3, I guess that's cool. But like, yeah, the juice ain't worth the squeeze on this one. This is a bottom of C for me because these are still kind of passable. They're still better than like temples and stuff for me. But like, yeah, I'd probably rather play most of this other stuff. Next up, once again, we're talking about Urborg again. Like I said, it probably shouldn't have been in the utility, but they do provide good utility. But these are mostly fixing lands. Urborg makes all land swamps. Yep, this card's excellent. If I'm playing black, this is kind of free roll. Any amount of colors. If I'm in like 4 and 5 colors, I'm just cutting a swamp for it. 3 colors, I'll still have my swamps. But yeah, I'm just putting Urborg in like any deck that plays this, that plays black. Even in some decks that just have a bunch of like, you know, utility lands that don't tap for color. Even if I'm not playing black, I might play this one or Yavimaya for that reason, because then it makes those lands also tap for mana. But Urborg also has the high upside of working with Cabal Coffers to make insane mana. That being said, like I said in last video, don't play Cabal Coffers in your 3 and 4 color decks unless you're a Lands deck, and you can always get it. But Urborg is just, like I said, a free roll. If you're playing black, you just put this in your deck. I think I'm gonna put it like here. I'm gonna move Yavimaya up next to it. Urborg is a little better. But they're basically the same. Next up, Cavern of Souls. As Cavern of Souls enter the battlefield, you choose a creature type. It taps for a colorless mana, or you can add 1 mana of any color that you can spend to cast a creature spell of the chosen type, and that creature can't be countered. Cavern of Souls is extremely powerful. If you are in a tribal deck, this is just a rainbow land for you that also protects your spells, which is nuts. But even in like non-tribal decks, if you are just playing a deck that has a really powerful commander, like a Korvold or Chulane or whatever, you just play this and you name one of the types of your commander, and then you just make sure your commander is not counterable. Yeah, and then when you're not casting your commander or a card that shares a type with it, which probably won't be much of using it in that circumstance, it's still just a colorless land. If you really care about your commander, then this is, you'll be happy to play this in decks that aren't tribal too. I wouldn't play this in like 4 and 5 color like pile decks. Like if I'm playing like a Kenrith deck that, has like a bunch of just good stuff in it, then I'm not going to play this because the colorless untapped land is a pretty big downside. Probably same with 4 colors. If I'm playing like Breya or something, I'm not playing this. But in 3 colors and under, this is kind of a free roll if you care about your commander. So like Chulane, Korvolds, that sort of stuff. 2 color decks, same thing. But yeah, this is a pretty easy bottom of A for me. Because this is just goes in every tribal deck ever if you got one and could afford one if you don't have one, because they are expensive. But yeah, even in some other niche circumstances, you can play them in just regular decks too. Next up, we have the man lands. These are lands that enter the battlefield tapped, produce 2 different colors, and then you can pay some amount of mana to animate them into a creature. So this one is Creeping Tar Pit, for example. This one produces blue and black, and you can play a blue, black, and a colorless, and then Creeping Tar Pit becomes a 3/2 creature, elemental. It can't be blocked. So the man lands are pretty bad. I would rather play them than like a scry land. But always entering the battlefield tapped 2-color lands, especially when they just become pretty mediocre creatures for a ton of mana. I'm not really interested in playing hardly any of these. Creeping Tar Pit, this one, in like some niche circumstances like ninja decks or whatever specifically, then like I could play this one, or like Stirring Wildwood, the green-white one. It has reach, so if I'm really weak to flyers in my green-white deck, maybe I could play it, but like I'm still not really interested in playing these. But like I said, for me, I would rather play these than scry lands. But I would prefer fast lands, just lands that enter the battlefield untapped sometimes. So take that for what you will. Next up, we have bounce lands. These enter the battlefield tapped. When they enter the battlefield, you have to return a land you control to your hand. But they tap to produce 2 colors, or 2 mana of 2 different colors. So this is Azorius Chancery. This produces blue-white. So this is essentially a tap land, because you can still use the mana of the land that you're bouncing before you bounce it to your hand. So this is kind of like a weird, Guild Gate or whatever. That being said, bounce lands have kind of been going up for me. It was for a while that like I really wasn't interested in playing these, even though they kind of are pseudo card advantage because they put a land back in your hand. Like, that used to be basically nothing to me. But now that we're playing like a lot of modal DFCs and the new channel lands from like Kawigama, and like lots of lands that have like effects from your hand, like spell effects from your hand, I'm starting to kind of come back around to these. I put one in my lands deck now so I can tutor it and bounce like a Boseiju to my hand that I played earlier, or like a, whatever spell land that I played, modal DFC spell land that I played face down. So just within like the last like 2 years for me, I've started looking at bounce lands again, besides just like specifically 2-color decks. I'm still not interested in playing them even in like 4 and 5 color decks, even if I am playing some modal DFCs, because like at that point I can't afford like this like, slow tap land that also will probably replay another tap land that I have or whatever, So yeah, I really want this in a deck. I really want these bounce lands in a deck where I reliably have a lot of untapped other lands that are going to enter the battlefield. And also I'm looking to play this with like spell lands. So like I said, the channel lands or modal DFCs or whatever. So I can rebuy them and use them as spells later or whatever. So that all being said, I'm still not going to give them a super high grade, but I think with the extra utility that they've been getting lately, I think I am going to put them on top of C. But if we keep getting like, if we do get more modal DFC lands, or we keep getting lands that are spells in your hands, like the channel lands and such, if we get more of those, I hope we don't, because they are insanely powerful. And what we have is pretty nice already. But if we do get more of them, then these slowly just keep creeping up this list. But as it stands right now, I am starting to get interested in playing like one of these in my decks that are, 3 colors or whatever that have those lands. But still, I'm not like super happy about these. But yeah, definitely keep these in mind though if you take my last video into heart, and with the modal DFCs being very valuable and such. Next up, we have not a complete cycle, but we do have the Tainted cycle. So these are lands that enter the battlefield untapped. They produce a colorless mana, but if you control a swamp, they can produce a black or another color. So this one's Tainted Peak. You can tap it for black or red if you have a swamp. These are very nice in specifically 2-color decks, obviously, that play black. They're good on a budget. They're very good in 2-color decks because this is just an untapped dual lane most of the time. Even in 3 colors, I'm still kind of interested in these if I am heavy black. But I'm starting to fall off of them after that. So they're kind of narrow, but in the circumstances that you play them in, they are quite good. But that being said, I still think that means they have to fall into C. But I would rather like play these over like filter lands or whatever in the decks that I can play them. I'll put them above Path of Ancestry too, but not above Bounce Lands because of the extra utility. All right, we're going to be scraping the bottom of the barrel these last few. Next up is Evolving Wilds. Enters the battlefield untap, and you tap and sack it to search library for a basic land that comes in the battlefield tapped. Terramorphic Expanse, same card. These I just don't play anymore. No matter what deck I'm in. I don't even play these in like monocolor lands decks. The only time you could ever really like play these, I think, is if you're on like a pretty strict budget. But even then, I'm starting to look to cut these for like a lot of these other budget options that we have now, like the Pathways or Ash Barrens or even Temples and, you know, the check lands. And there's just like, yeah, basically like any of these other lands almost on this list I would rather play, except for like these other Ds. I think I would rather play Evolving Wilds over these other Ds, but nothing up here in the C range I would play Evolving Wilds over for sure. So I don't really play this. I could see like playing it in like a 3-color or like a 4-color budget deck. But yeah, like you'd have to be on a pretty strict budget because like you can just buy a bunch of these really cheap rare dual lands, and I'd play like any of those over just an Evolving Wilds. All right, next up we got Guild Gates. I would rather play a Guild Gate than a Signet land, but everybody knows what a Guild Gate is. Just a land that's battlefield tap and produces 2 colors. The only time I would ever play this is if I'm in a gate specific deck. But these are the lowest of the low outside of Signet lands that I would literally never play. Next up, we have do we call these buddy lands? Is that what they call? These are the buddy lands of the check lands. I don't remember. I think these are the buddy lands and the other ones are the check lands. Anyway, these are lands that enter the battlefield tapped unless you control a land type of the 2 mana colors that it produces. So this is Dragon Skull Summit. Enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a swamp or a mountain, and then this produces a black or a red. These are great. I'm happy to play these. They are not like super powerful or stellar. I'm always playing these in 2-color decks. I'm interested. I will probably play these in 3-color decks, for sure. Especially if I'm heavy on 2 colors and like splashing the 3rd. These lands are very solid. They're not very expensive, so that's an extra bonus. But yeah, I'm never too upset to play check lands. You could technically play these in 4 colors, but I would try not to. These are Bs for me. I'm gonna put them like here. Lastly, we have the Tri lands. So these are lands that enter the battlefield tapped, and they produce 3 different colors of mana. This one's Jungle Shrine. This is the Naya one. It produces red, green, or white. This is kind of the same scenario as Evolving Wilds. I really only play this if I'm on a budget. I wouldn't like go out of my way to like ever play these, even if I'm in specifically these 3 colors. I would rather just play more of these dual lands, fetch lands, fixing stuff. But that being said, if you are on a budget, you can play these in 3+ color decks and they'll be fine. The entering the battlefield tapped is worth it when you get to 3 colors over just 2 colors like Guild Gates and such. But still, to me, it's got to have a little bit more than that. So I'm gonna land these and see, like right here. Yeah, I think that's about where I like it. All right. So yeah, this is my list. We got, the usual suspects at the top fetch lands, best lands ever printed. Shock lands go tandem with fetch lands. Get these Battle Bond lands, especially the ones from Commander Legends, while they're cheap. And then when the new Commander Legends comes out that has the OG ones from actual Battle Bond, pick those up too. They'll be cheap. But yeah, hopefully you found that informative and helpful. Thanks for hanging around. I'm going to do like my usual and post the link to this in the description if you want to make your own list and show it to me or so on. And yeah, thanks a lot for tuning in. Hope you have a great night.